Awesome, folks. Well, welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you so much for all that effort, energy, and focus you popped into delivering your presentations there. If your partner did a great job, go ahead, drop a yes in the chat, and maybe drop an adjective in there as well. Great job, fantastic job, however you would like to describe their presentation. Positive, of course. Excellent. On that note, folks, next we're going to shift gears a little bit and we're going to go into the world of storytelling. Everyone, drop an S for storytelling into the chat box there for me, please. Drop an S. Excellent, folks, right? So, storytelling, if I can be completely honest, is something I've really struggled with in the past. But I started to realize over time with my own research and learning from my mentor that ultimately one of the most powerful ways that we can actually influence others is through really strategic and effective storytelling. Okay. Now, the thing is, whenever we tell a story and we craft characters, the listener actually creates a bond with the characters in the story. And as a result, oxytocin is ignited or released in the mind. And people will often remember stories far easier than they will remember facts. Okay. So stories sell, stories tell, stories change lives. Facts don't. Okay. Facts alone don't. Okay. Now, stories really powerful, but there's a couple of things that we need to remember about them. And generally, in my life, I've found that people are generally really good at telling them, or they struggle in storytelling. And so for me, I would say I'm more so the person that has struggled in the past because I'm like, my stories are pretty boring. Oh, this or that. It's a minor detail, doesn't really matter. But then I realized that the more you put into your stories, the more vivid you make them, the more underlying messages you put into the stories, and the more you layer your metaphors in your stories, the more you actually create a catalyst for change in your audience, right? Now, in regards to telling stories, though, there are some fundamentals that we need to think about. And we're going to go ahead and not yet, but in a moment, we're going to look at a page on our manual. But first, we're going to look at some fundamentals, right? So, first things that we're going to look at on the screen there is number one, we want to set the scene, the sights, the sounds, the colors, and who's there, what are they wearing, what are they thinking, what emotions are they having. Okay, so it's all about creating vivid life and emotion to our story. Everyone, drop an E for emotion into the chat box there for me, please. Awesome. Next thing we want to create is moments of decision and action. Decision and action. Decision and action. Everyone, drop a DA in the chat box there for me if you could, please. So ultimately, any and every great story will always have episodes of decision and action, i.e., the main character, you or someone else, has a moment where they make a decision and they take new action. And as a result of that new action, they got a new result. Okay. So they were in a bit of a crisis situation and they made a decision, they took some action, and they were able to resolve the situation. Okay. Next piece is timing of the story. Okay. So ultimately, with stories, there's a general idea in training that we don't want to put a negative story at the end. Drop in the chat, why would you not want to put a negative story at the end of a session or a workshop? Why would you not want to do that? Excellent, right? So you're actually going to find that it's going to create a negative vibe in the training room, and people are not going to feel fantastic as they leave the room. Now, we generally want to ideally, if we're going to tell a story, we want to position it before the content. So tell your story, then tell the content. Okay. You can tell the content, then tell a story, but just in regards to propulsion, it's not as significant or it's not as profound. If you have content, then story, story, then content, it's going to be even better. Next thing we need to think about is what's the point of your story? Why are you actually telling it? And the last thing you want to be doing is just telling random stories for the sake of you sharing your war stories. Drop a yes in the chat if that kind of makes sense to everyone. Excellent, right? So, on that note, what I'd love to do is we're going to shift over to page 36 in our manuals. Page 36 in our manuals, right? Now, page 36, up the top there, we've got a place for you to take some notes. Now, not yet, but in mind, I'm going to tell you a quick story. And what I would love you to do is, as you listen to the story on page 36 there, I would love you to take some notes and just notice what comes up for you in the story and potentially what do you think makes it a good quality story there, right? Now, it is a true story, and I am going to put myself in the main character position. It's actually a story I heard from someone else, but for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to put myself in the middle of the story, if that makes sense. All right. So on that note, it's a story about safety. About safety. Just keep that in mind. Awesome, folks. So let's jump into it. Hi, folks. Today, before we go into today's session about workplace health and safety, I want to tell you a quick story. Now, this is something that happened to me only 3 weeks ago on the railroad. Now, as many of you know, I actually work on the railway, on the railroad here in Queensland. And if you had been with me about 3 weeks ago, you would have probably seen me in the locker room, getting ready and putting on my high vis PPE. All right. And it was that day, and I was a little bit tired. I was a little bit stressed out because the night before, it had been a big night. I'd been watching the State of Origin, but, coming to work and, I was going through the motions there, putting on the high vis, and I saw my steel cap boots. Now, normally I'm a little bit lazy and I don't actually put on my steel cap boots. I go for the sneakers. They are a lot more comfortable whenever I am driving the train or work on the railroad. But for some reason, that day, I just thought, no, I'm actually going to pop the boots on today. Just something inside of me is telling me, pop the boots on, right? So I made a decision, took some action, and then something interesting happened. It was only about an hour later that something happened on the train as I was working on it that had never happened before, that I will never, ever forget to this day. You see, I was working on the carriage, and as I was working on it, something snapped off the actual carriage. It was one of those really nasty, sharp sticks that we actually use when we close the door. And it was in that moment, as it snapped off and fell on my foot, that I looked down and I had a huge, huge sigh of relief. Because I realized in that moment, if that had snapped and fallen on my foot and I'd been wearing my sneakers, I probably would have lost my leg. And it was so, so awesome to just in that moment realize, yeah, hey, I got my steel cap boots on and my foot was good to go. But it was in that moment that I made the decision. I was never, ever, ever, ever going to get complacent on my PPE ever again. So, folks, let's jump into it and let's take a look at what PPE is and how we can use it to our best possible advantage. Alrighty, folks. Drop in the chat. What's one thing that you noticed about the story or something that really stood out to you from that story and how it was shared with you? Drop in the chat. What's one thing you noticed about it? Fantastic, fantastic. So now what I'd love you to do is on page 36 there, I'd love you to make some notes. One thing or two things that really stood out to you from that story. Excellent. So I'll just give you about a minute, 2 minutes, just write down anything at all that came to you. Awesome. Fantastic. Fantastic. All right. So let's check out the blanks here on the page. So storytelling fundamentals. So all timing all comes back to the emotion you are looking to create. Okay. So timing all comes back to the emotion you are looking to create, right? So if you want to create a particular emotion, telling a story is a great way to do it, but you've got to be aware of what emotions you are going to create. Next one, all stories must have a point and must create a feeling. A what, folks? Drop an F for feeling in the chat. Excellent. Now, as part of all great stories, they're all going to have some element of decision and action. Decision and action. Now, next piece is the key phrase to use when telling a story. Now, I'd love you to grab a pen and write this in. The key phrase is, if you had been with me. So I'll say it again. If you had been with me. So if you had been with me 3 weeks ago at work, you would have been with me in the locker room of Queensland Rail. All right. So the key phrase is if you had been with me. Okay. So if you'd been with me, you would have seen, or you would have heard, or you would have seen around you. All right. What's the key phrase there? Drop in the chat if you had been with me. Fantastic, right? So, not yet, but in a moment, we're going to forget all of that. We're going to forget all of that for just a moment. And we're going to head into a breakout room. And what I would love you to do, you are simply going to head to a breakout room and you are going to tell your partner. So, today is Saturday. I'd like you to tell your partner essentially what is something that you did last weekend? Now, you may need to think about that. You may need to look at your calendar, but I would like you to tell your partner what you did last weekend. And it could be anything at all, but your task is to make it as boring as possible. So you may just say to your partner, hey, how you going? How was your weekend? And your partner says, yeah, it was okay. Went to the beach and walked on the beach and threw a ball on the beach. Okay. So your task is to make it as bland as possible and have no color, no flavor to it at all. All right. So it's going to be, how's your weekend? Good. I went to the beach. And just explain it a little bit, but make sure you have as little color as possible. All right. Then you're going to swap over to the other person. How's your weekend? Great. Describe it. What'd you do? But keep out of the details. All right. So, and then I'm just going to give you the punchline. Then we're going to come back and we're going to acknowledge how boring the story was. Right. So, on that note, not yet, but in a moment, we're going to do a breakout room. As I said, ask your partner, how was your weekend? And tell them in the most boring way possible that you truly can. All right. Give them the details, but tell them in a really, really boring fashion. All right, so I'll give you about, say, a minute, minute and a half. So back and forth. How was your weekend? Yeah, it was okay. Went to the beach. Went with my friends. Yeah, had some snacks. Yeah, it was okay. And then swap over to the other person and just play that out. On that note, folks, I'll see you back here in a minute and a half. Let's go for it. Awesome, awesome. Welcome back, team. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Now, on that note, we're now going to light the story up. We're now going to light the story up, but in this case, we're just going to first of all practice setting the scene, sights, sounds, and colors. Okay. And what I'd love you to do is not yet, but in a moment, you're going to tell exactly the same story, but to someone else, of course, about what you did last weekend and an episode from the weekend. All right. So that would sound like, hey, how you going? Good. How was your weekend? Oh, last weekend. Oh my gosh. If you had been with me, if you had been with me, you would have seen, you would have been at the beach, right? And I went to the beach and we had such a fantastic time, me and my family. If you'd been with us, you would have seen us, playing with the ball on the beach. And we had such a fun time. I had just got this brand new T-shirt from Maya. It was an amazing T-shirt. It was fully blue. My wife, she was wearing a hat, and we were having such a great time just kicking the ball around. We were feeling so excited to be there, and it was just awesome for the entire family to be there as we were just having fun on the beach. And yeah, then from there, we went and had some ice cream. And if you'd been with us, you would have seen us walk into the shop. And it took us a long time to pick our favorite flavor of ice cream. The kids just took forever. And they oh my gosh, kids, hurry up and pick your flavor of ice cream. Eventually, they picked the choc chip, and my wife picked the mint. All right, it was great. They really enjoyed it. If you'd been with me, you would have seen some very happy faces. Alrighty, folks, we're just going to pause there. Now, that was a little bit exaggerated, and I was picking apart some details there, but I was looking to include the magic phrase of, if you had been with me. And I was looking to set the scene, bring the sights, bring the sounds alive as much as I could. All right. Drop a yes in the chat if you could hear that as that was occurring. Excellent. Alrighty. So far we've told the boring version. We've told a story that's lit up slightly. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to build in some decision action. And what we need to appreciate is any time that you can actually share a breakthrough for yourself or a breakthrough for somebody else, then your story can be extremely powerful and land very nicely in the minds of our listener. So what we're going to do, we're going to now practice telling a mentoring story. Mentoring story. All right. Now, a mentoring story. A mentoring story is kind of the story of when somebody spoke some words into your life, and as a result of that more mentoring, your life completely transformed. All right. So let's come back to here for just a moment. And I'm going to tell you an episode or an example of a mentoring story. Okay. Now, if you can get this one right, then you can bridge it into case studies and different ways as well. Right. But let's jump into a mentoring story. All right. So, folks, as we look at today's topic around wealth management and about managing your money, it really takes me back in time and it reminds me of an episode in my life. Now, if you had been with me back in probably about 2000, maybe 2008, 2009, you would have seen me at my house. You would have probably seen me sitting in my office chair, and I was in a pretty bad way as I was crying and looking at my bank statement. You see, I consistently, ever since I started working at that university, had really struggled with my finances. In Japan, I'd been making a lot of money, but I came back to Australia, and every single week I was struggling with my finances. And if you'd been with me, you probably would have seen how distraught I actually was, because I got to a stage where I couldn't even afford a haircut. And even though that was going on, I did have a commitment to making my life even better. So I was scrounging around to find money to engage a coach to help me improve my life. And I had a coaching call with my coach at the time. Her name was Mia. And Mia said something to me that completely transformed my perspective around money. And Mia essentially said, Mark, I know you've got some stuff going on around money. Mark, I need to give you a piece of advice. Are you willing to take it on? And I said, yeah, I will do anything, Mia. And she said, Mark, okay, you say you want a haircut, but are you actually committed to getting that haircut? I said, yeah, absolutely. I want the haircut. She said, okay, well, I need you to apply a very basic principle, which most people resist, but is going to transform everything. I said, Mia, what is it? And she said, Mark, I need you to start to pay yourself first. I'm like, oh, come on. I've heard that 1,000 times. And she's like, no, I need you to start. Well, as soon as you get paid, I need you to put $10 aside for your haircut. I'm like, oh, I can't do it. I said, no, if you're committed, you're going to take the action. And it was in that moment on our coaching call that I made the decision and I took the action and I started to put together a payment plan or an automatic transfer to pay myself first. And as a result of that, the following 2 weeks, I was able to actually go and get my very first, I would say, reasonably priced haircut because I made the decision took some action, and I actually made myself the priority in my wealth and my finances. But that all started with me saying yes to paying myself first. And even to this day, I actually every second week go off and get a haircut because for me, that's a really important thing, and I love to do it. So today, as we travel into the world of wealth, we're going to look at how can we make sure that we are the priority and we are living for ourselves, not just for living for our next paycheck. On that note, folks, let's jump into it. Okay, so that, folks, is an episode of words from your mentor type story, so to speak, right? So what do? We create a bit of a crisis situation, me in my bedroom, right? If you had been with me, bit of a crisis, right? Now, I could build that up as me, the main character, or I could talk about Bill or Mary, or even somebody that's gone through your training that had a bit of a crisis point. They learned something that you taught them, and as a result, they had a breakthrough, right? So, not yet, but in a moment, what I would like you to think about is something that maybe one day your mentor taught you or that your boss taught you. And what I'd like you to do is not yet, but in a moment, you're going to head to a breakout room and you're simply going to share with your partner that magical episode. So that would sound like, hey, folks, so I want to talk to you about leadership. But before we go into it, I want to tell you a quick story about something that my mentor once taught me. Now, if you had been with me back in blah blah time, you would have seen blah blah. All right. Drop a yes in the chat if this is making sense for you. Fantastic, right? And as part of the story, make sure that you bring the character to life, create some decision, create some action, and paint out the final result and what was possible for the character of the story. It doesn't have to be you, but it's going to work better if it is you. All right. So just to recap, how do we start it off? Hey, how you going? Today I want to talk about the topic of blah, blah. Before we get into the story, before we get into the content, I want to tell you a quick story. Okay. So that's kind of how you lead it off. And on that note, I'll probably give you about 2 minutes each to tell your story, and I'll bring you back in about 4 minutes' time. All right. Now, what I would love you to do is the listener, please be timing the other person and then swap over once you get to the 2 minute mark. All right. On that note, folks, head to your rooms and I'll bring you back in 4 minutes' time. Thank you so much. See you shortly. If you had been with me, go for it. Awesome. Well done, team. Well done, well done, well done, well done. If your partner told a pretty good story, drop a hard yes in the chat. YES. Excellent. Love it, love it, love it, folks. On that note, what I would love you to do, drop in the chat. What's one discovery, insight, or aha moment that you've had around storytelling that maybe you didn't know before, or maybe you got reminded of, folks? Drop in the chat. What'd you get reminded of, or what'd you discover? Excellent, excellent, excellent. Alrighty, folks. Now, on that note, next thing we want to have a look at is personalities. Personalities, right? Now, in our workshop or in our training environment, we're going to come across a lot of different personalities, right? And the thing is, the better we can actually work with those personalities and use those personalities to our advantage, the more we're actually going to create a very, very successful learning environment. And what I would love you to do as we go through this section is if you could turn to page, let me find a page number. All right, page 65. Page 65. All right, page 65 in your manuals. Page 65 in your manuals there. All right, so basically, in any learning environment, you're going to come across 4 major behavioral types or personality types that are going to show up in your learning environment. Now, As I go through this, I'm going to share some characteristics of each type. Now, this model is kind of a bastardized model based on the Kolb and the Kolb model, so to speak, the Honey and Mumford model, Honey and Mumford model. However, I've changed it a little bit, and I've basically tailored it. I've changed it a little bit based on my own research, experience, and things that have become quite predictable for me in a learning environment after having taught workshops over 12 years now, right? So, on that note, folks, let's jump in. Let's look at the 4 behavioral types that you're going to see in any learning environment. All right, folks. So the P stands for pragmatist, right? So you may want to grab a pen and write these in on page 65 there, right? So P stands for pragmatist, pragmatist. Okay, and I might even write this up here on the slide, just so that you've got them there. Pragmatist. All right, so pragmatist. Now, next one, A stands for activist. Okay, R stands for reflector, if I can spell correctly there, reflector. And then T stands for theorist. Okay. Now, pragmatist, activist, reflector, and theorist, generally, all of us as humans will lean towards more of one of the other or than the others, so to speak, right? However, in a learning environment, and different contexts, we also may show up differently as well. So keep that in mind that in one particular environment, some people may show up as one type, or another environment, they may show up as another type as well. But each of these 4 types will generally just demonstrate particular types of behavior. And if you can work with it and predict it, then you can create even more powerful learning experiences. So generally we say with a pragmatist, they like to jump in and have a go. They like to jump in and have a go. Jump in, have a go. And they don't worry too much about getting it right or wrong. They just want to get in there, have a go. Okay. Now, an activist, they like to test the boundary conditions of the learning environment. They may ask a lot of questions to test the validity of things going on. And they may be like, oh, they really want to know where does it come from and is it true and valid information? Okay. Now, reflector. Now, a reflector likes to learn best from watching other people, and they like to have time to process information. Okay. Time to process information. Generally, they're a little bit shyer and quieter than other people. A theorist, they are somebody that likes the facts, the figures, the data, and they are very particular about getting everything right. And they are the analytical types, which is great. Okay. Now, having said that, all 4 of these types will show up a little bit differently in a learning environment. And let's play a little game. Drop in the chat. Who do you think might look through materials and they might spot typos very quickly? Who do you think might spot typos very quickly? Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. The theorist, right? Excellent. Now, who might be the people that come in and they may say, excuse me, I don't think your instructions for finding the car park are very good. I had so many problems finding a car park. Drop in the chat, who might that be? Excellent, excellent. All right. Now, next one, who might you want to pick as your volunteer to do activities? Beautiful. Pragmatist. Excellent. Now, who might you want to pick as somebody to be a class debate leader? Class debate leader. Excellent. Activists, right? Now, when you're doing activities, who do you think might finish first? Who do you think might finish first? Beautiful. Pragmatist. Who do you think might finish last? Who do you think might finish last? Excellent. A theorist, right? Now, we need to appreciate everyone's perfect and beautiful. Everyone brings their own energy and awesomeness to a training environment. Yet, if we don't know this, we can sometimes get a little bit frustrated and take things personally. Okay. So, pragmatists, they love to jump in, have a go. All right. And it's really about speed for them. They want to get things done and done quickly. Activists, they want to make sure that they're going to feel heard and validated. Reflectors, they want to feel like they've got enough time to do the tasks. Theorists, they want to feel like they've got clarity around every single thing that they are about to do and have just done. Now, here's the challenge, though, folks. When you actually come to doing activities, you need to be aware of what happens if you combine people in a particular way. Drop in the chat, what do you think might happen if you put two pragmatists together? Very good, team. They're going to jostle for leadership and they may get a little bit competitive. All right. Activists, what do you think might happen if you put two activists together? Excellent. They may argue about what needs to be done and how to do it. Excellent. Reflectors. What do you think might happen if you put two reflectors together? Yeah, exactly. Not much at all. They're going to be waiting for the other person to go first, and they're going to be very quiet. Okay. T stands for theorists. What happens if you put two theorists together? Well, probably not very much. They're going to reread the instructions, overread the instructions, overcomplicate the instructors, and they're going to be checking all the Googles and checking all other resources to make sure they do it just right. Okay. So, on that note, before I knew this content, I used to get a little frustrated with people because they would demonstrate things that were different to how I behaved. Or I would react and I would blame the learners, not realizing that everybody's perfect and beautiful and everyone brings their own unique gifts and talents. Now, in regards to society, we definitely want to make sure that we've got all parts available whenever we're undertaking a project. You want the pragmatist doing the practical work. You want the activist that maybe is arguing for the need of the thing and the business case. You want the reflector out there benchmarking and doing research into the project. And theorists, you want the theorists, the engineers, the architects, the accountants checking all of the details. All right. So, on that note, what I encourage all trainers, all presenters, all workshop facilitators to do is actually write on a sticky note PART and just start to look for the various personalities that are out there in an audience and potentially even start to not necessarily put a permanent label on someone, but start to look for some of the behaviors that may be presenting to you and start to think about, okay, right now that person is acting more so like a XYZ. And if I was going to pair that person up, I'd probably want to pair them up with another or another or another and start to get strategic around your pairing. Okay. Because when you know this, life gets very, very predictable in a learning environment. On that note, folks, what I'd love you to do is head to a breakout room and simply share with your partner what's one thing you've discovered from this conversation around the 4 behavioral types that you will see in a learning environment. All right. Awesome. Alrighty, welcome back, team. Welcome back, welcome back. All right, drop in the chat. What's one thing you discovered, you realized, and really stood out to you, knowing that yes, in different contexts, you can be a different behavioral type there. And even for myself, when I go into a learning mode, I go to more reflector. When I am training, I'm more of a pragmatist. Just needs to be that, right? So on that note, folks, drop in the chat. What did you discover? What did you realize? Excellent. And happy to take any questions on that, of course, as well. Alrighty. Fantastic, folks. Fantastic. Well, on that note, what we're now going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of these words. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at our key learnings from the day. Key learnings from the entire course. And what I would love you to do is, not yet, but in a moment, you're going to head over to um, Alrighty, folks. So that is a little bit about the behavioral types that you may come across in a learning environment, right? So not yet, but in a moment, we're going to round off here, folks. We are going to look at our key learnings from the entire day and from even yesterday as well, but the course in general. Not yet, but in a moment, I'd love you to turn to page 76. Page 76. And I would love you on page 76 there to actually create a learning inventory. And what that means is just looking back through your notes, any notes at all that you've taken, that would be your top 6 key learnings from the entire course. On that note, folks, I'm going to send you to a breakout room and I would love you to list out your top 6 learnings for the entire course. Could be anything at all. Go ahead, head to a breakout room, list out your top 6, and then I would love to hear from some people. Excellent, folks. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. So not yet, but in a moment, you are going to share with the entire group, rapid fire your top 6. So on that note, we're going to come over to Craig. Craig, if you'd unmute yourself and read your list of 6 key learnings from the course. What would they be? Craig, over to you. And no need to explain them. Just go rapid fire this, and this, and that would be great. Then we're going to head over to Mary Ann. Excellent, Craig. Great job. Thank you so much for the share. And we will acknowledge shares at the very end there. Marianne, go for it. What you got? What are your top 6? All right. Bill, what are yours? Excellent. Love it. Frank, over to you. Excellent. Bill, over to you. All right. Fantastic, folks. Well, a huge congratulations on those key learnings. Really, really appreciate it. Now, we are going to do one quick thing in the manual, and I'm just going to walk you through the appendices, so to speak. So I'm just going to walk you through the appendices, just so that you know what else is in the manual. And basically on starting on page 68 there, on page 68 that you'll be able to read in your own time, we have a workshop roadmap. Now, this is a similar roadmap to what's in the book, Creating Transformation, but basically it's a great reminder of if you were going to plan and deliver an entire workshop, this roadmap will include all the key items that we talked about yesterday and today, but also correlates back to the roadmap that's in the book there, right? So if you're wondering, well, how do I put all of this together? Well, you can follow this in this roadmap here, right? So that goes on 68 and 69. And then on page 70, we have a list of various activities that you can do in a workshop, which is super exciting. And this list is, it's not limited just what's here. There's more activities listed in the book as well. Next one, we've got some notes pages on page 71. We've got the format quiz on page 72 and 73. And then we got some extra planning sheets on 74, 75 there for format. We got some notes pages there as well. And that's really cool. So, all right. So now I have to say a huge congratulations. I want to say congratulations to every single one of you for taking 2 entire days out of your life to dedicate to actually learning these skills and being curious about how to take your results to the next level. And essentially, I want to say it's been a huge privilege and honor to walk you through over the last 2 days some content that I believe will truly help you out going forward and definitely increase your confidence even more as you're able to create very predictable outcomes. Going forward, team, aim to speak to be remembered. Stay curious. Only you can give yourself permission to be amazing on stage. And going forward, stay curious, stay open to new ideas, and know that the bigger possibilities are only an extra stretch of your imagination. All right. So on that note, folks, I just want to say a huge thank you. It's been awesome to hang out with you guys over 2 days. See you guys shine and shine in the ways that you do. Now from this event, I'm going to send you through a link to join the Facebook group. I'm going to send you through a recording of the last 2 days that you'll be able to rewatch and see different segments. And if you have any questions, as I said, as part of being this a part of this training, you will actually get 12 months mentoring from me. So you will be able to send me a question anytime about anything that's going on for you workshop wise. And I'm also happy to review any content that you may be putting together and provide some thoughts around it if you were stuck on putting together a session as well, or even a keynote presentation. But on that note, folks, thank you so much. Go ahead, drop in some farewell comments if you'd like to, or some goodbyes or farewells. But thank you so much, team. It's been an absolute pleasure. Travel well, stay safe, and with great power comes great responsibility. And you guys now have the great power. Thank you so much, team. Bye for now.